This video is only an overview of the parts installation, so be sure to check the website for the current downloadable instructions. Also, refer to a Porsche service manual anytime when performing work on your car. Remember to follow standard safety procedures, including the use of safety glasses, jack stands, and other proper lifting procedures. Hey guys, I'm Daniel with Elephant Racing. Today we're going to be showing you how to install front and rear MCS coilovers on this Porsche 993. We're going to be utilizing the stock strut mounts, but these could also be installed with any aftermarket strut mount. This is a front MCS coilover. You'll notice the high build quality. It provides stock mounting features for your brake line and electrical connections. This unit is the one-way rebound adjustable coilover. Also offered is a remote reservoir version with additional adjustability, and they're available in different lengths. The 18-position rebound adjustment is very linear. The valving proves to be very consistent on our shock dyno. We ship these with a custom spring rate for your application. Additionally, we include a helper spring, divider collar, spring seat bearing, and our own custom spring perch for maximum articulation. In this application, we're going to be using the OEM strut mount off the original strut. When disassembling the strut, you'll find the nut, the mount, a spacer, and then the spring perch. We will be using the spacer and the mount, but not the nut or the perch. You'll notice on the stem of the strut a threaded portion and an unthreaded portion. When installing your mount, if the unthreaded portion protrudes past the top of the mount, you'll need to add additional spacers underneath the nut to allow the nut to torque properly onto the mount. I'm going to start with the reused OEM spacer. Then I'm going to install the OEM mount. When I push down, I can see the unthreaded portion protruding past the top of the mount, so I will need to use a spacer in this application. Next, I'm going to install the provided hardware. Before tightening the strut mount, MCS recommends having the rebound adjustment set in the basic setting. To do this, rotate the adjuster clockwise until it stops. Don't force it past this position. Now rotate it counterclockwise to the first detent. This is position 0. From here, rotate counterclockwise 8 clicks. This is the basic position. Now it's time to torque the nuts down onto the mount. Per MCS's instructions, cinch the nut onto the mount with a couple blows from a plastic mallet. Next, install the jam nut and tighten against the lower nut. I like to add some paint between the nut and the stem. Lastly, install the adjustment knob, tightening the Allen to keep it from falling off. Now I'm going to show you how to install the OEM mount onto the rear coilover. We are going to be reusing the safety washer, the mount, and the lower washer. Similar to the front, the stem has a threaded portion and an unthreaded portion. If the unthreaded portion protrudes past the top of the mount, you'll need to add spacers so the nut can torque down onto the mount properly. Before tightening the mount, you'll want to make sure the rebound adjuster is in the basic setting, the same as the front. Unique to the rear, there will be an adapter sleeve in between the spring perch and the stem of the shock. I'm going to start with the lower washer from the OEM strut. Then I'm going to add the mount. Next, I'm going to install the safety washer, making sure the tabs on the mount line up with the slots in the washer. In this case, the unthreaded portion does not protrude past the top of the mount, and no spacer is needed. Now I will add the hardware provided with the coilover set. Now to tighten the mount. The procedure for tightening the mount is the same as the front, cinching the nut onto the mount with a couple blows from a plastic mallet. Next, add the jam nut, tightening against the lower nut. Lastly, install the adjustment knob and tighten the Allen to hold it in place. It's easiest to install the factory harness mounting features before you install the strut. Now we're going to install the MCS coilover. You'll notice that we've removed the stock strut mount and added our quick change camber plate. The procedure for either will be the same. When working on suspensions, it's always good to support the components to not allow the ball joints to overextend, max out, or be damaged. I like to use a wire or a jack stand. You'll notice I've removed the rotor, the caliper, and the backing plate. This is both for visibility and to reduce the weight of the component and make it easier to work with. The strut mounts are directional. The factory mount has a red dot that must point forward. Our mounts, you want the logo towards the front of the car. To start, assemble the strut into the body and tighten the top nuts by hand. This can be easier with a second person. It's important to follow the proper torquing procedure, because if over-tightened, it's common for these studs to break. Now I'm going to assemble the bottom bolts. It can be tricky to get the strut around the upright. It's all about getting the angles correct. Once slid in, line the top bolt up and get the top bolt into the bore so it can slide. Now take your nut plate and line it up on the back. Notice there is a smaller and a larger nut. The smaller nut goes to the top. Once the bolt is started in the nut, you can move on to the bottom bolt. The bore for this bolt is tight and must be lined up correctly. Once it's through, make sure it goes into the nut plate. Now that these bolts are started, you can snug them up, but don't torque them yet because they'll need to be loose to align the vehicle. Now I'm going to run the brake line through the mounting point on the strut. You'll notice I've got the brake line capped to keep the fluid from leaking. You also could use the bleed nipple cap off the brake caliper. I'm going to feed the line through the strut. And then I'm going to assemble the clip into the line and tap it down until it seats. Now I'm going to connect the electrical connection for the speed sensor. This is a square connector and it will go in the square hole here. There is no backwards. Now I'm going to run the ground wire to the speed sensor bolt. I'm not going to clip this connector yet because I still need to connect the brake wear sensor, but I can slide this holder in like that. Now that that's installed, I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the backing plate, the rotor, and the caliper, making sure to connect the brake line and the wear sensor. Now we're going to assemble the rear suspension of the vehicle. The strut has been pre-installed, but the procedure is simple. The tow arm will need to be removed to remove and install the strut. Start by sliding the strut up between the upper control arms into the body and tighten the nuts on top. Now you'll want to slide the strut into the upright. You might need to put a jack under the upright and adjust the height so that the holes line up correctly. After it's in position, slide the tie rod pin through both the upright and the strut, capturing it. Then swivel the tie rod back and put the eccentric bolt in. Now torque everything to spec. Height adjustment of the MCS is achieved by rotating the upper collar. Once the height is achieved, lock the lower collar to the upper collar and use the tools provided with the MCS to secure the lower collar against the upper collar to prevent it from rotating. Now your height is set. Height should not be adjusted with the weight of the vehicle on the strut.